moving on to video number 2 of reviewing girls and autism, educational, family and personal perspectives. So the next chapter, after Carrie Grant's one, discusses the experiences of Vanessa Bob. Now, Vanessa Bob is a mother of 3, and all 3 of her children have various conditions, including autism. And she set up a group, called A Second Voice to support autistic kids. And I think she lives in London. Now, her chapter is interesting because she talks about the underdiagnosis of black people and people from ethnic communities, black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. So she herself is a black woman, and so she comes at this from her own experiences. And she talks about, because this wasn't something I was really aware of, because obviously like I'm aware of like the underdiagnosis of girls, but the underdiagnosis of like black people and people from ethnic minorities isn't something I'd really like thought about. But so it's quite interesting that underdiagnosis also occurs in that community as well, because of stereotypes. So she says that it took 10 years for her youngest daughter to get a diagnosis at 11 years old, and how her mental well-being deteriorated in that time. Both her daughters waited longer for diagnosis than her son, so there you have that kind of like intersectionality thing going on. So obviously like her daughters are both black, autistic and female. So because they are female, it takes them longer to get diagnosed, and also the fact that they're black as well. And her son, who's also obviously black, was diagnosed at 5 years old, so a lot younger than her daughters. And her oldest daughter waited until the age of 16 to be diagnosed. But even for her youngest son who got diagnosed first, it hasn't been plain sailing because of him being black. He's been judged. His autism has kind of like been overlooked because of stereotypes, and I thought that was like really interesting, because she says that autism was not recognised growing up in her community. Autism was overlooked because of a cultural difference. That her children in a particular culture that she comes from, her children, and I can't actually remember what culture it is. I didn't write it down. I think she said it was Jamaican or something, but I can't remember. Her children, in that culture, the children are seen and not heard. So the child was seen as rude and needing discipline, and her son's behaviour was explained away by the school as just a typical black boy, like just being hyperactive because there's a stereotype, and I wasn't even aware of these stereotypes. So reading about that was interesting, so I didn't realise about these things. And so yeah, that's like intersectionality at work again. Her children's diagnosis were often questioned, and also how her community often reject labels of disability as shameful and a sign of weakness. And yeah, so she says, I guess it's like there's a circular she talks about circularity, like how professionals see less autistic black people, so they believe that they're less affected by autism, and then that obviously becomes self-fulfilling as they expect to find fewer black children with autistic behaviour, so that's exactly what they do find. So yeah, that mirrors the kind of female autism thing, because professionals expect to see fewer girls with autism, that's what they find, and the same thing happens in the black community for both boys and girls, but particularly for girls. So yes, she talks about stereotypes, how in the media black boys are often portrayed as unruly, and then autistic behaviours are overshadowed by these stereotypes, or there are stereotypes of crime, mental health, and sort of cultural stereotypes of like a feisty black girl and single parent families. So behaviours explained away as like, oh, she's just missing her dad, because of these stereotypes that exist about black people in the media. And yeah, so they do not want to think about autism as a possibility. And then she also talks about how sometimes black autistic people can be even more vulnerable. So for example, a young black boy walking down the road with a hood on his head, if he starts running, like say, I don't know, in parts of like London, for example, people might be alarmed because they have this stereotype about gangs and stuff. But she said, you know, that could be her son, who might then get in trouble with the police just for the innocent reason that he's got his hood up because like he's overstimulated, but they might like think that he's acting suspiciously just because he happens to be black, but he uses his hood to block out the sun, but then others might not see that, okay, because they won't know about that, so they might see a potential gang member. So yeah, I thought that's like really interesting, because as I said, I never really considered underdiagnosis, like say in the black community, because I didn't know it was a thing. So that's really interesting, because you don't often hear it talked about, and that needs to be addressed, because it's not fair. Because often, like, as I say, the people who are most likely to be diagnosed with autism, so I think I said before, are white, cis, white, cis, heterosexual, middle-class boys. So if you're not in any of those categories, your chances of being diagnosed drop. And that's not right and it's not fair. That's a massive unequal thing that needs to be challenged. So the next chapter, on page 46, we hear from Sharon Horlock, who's a teacher and a special needs leader. And on chapter 7, she talks about the female identity of autistic girls in school. And she facilitates a girls group, which is she facilitates a girls group, which is a school-based support group. She's a special educational needs coordinator, and she has a daughter with Asperger's who was diagnosed at age 18. And for girls group that she facilitates, they meet weekly for girls who are all aged 11 to 17 and all diagnosed with autism. And she set this group up because in her setting, as is quite characteristic with other settings, girls with an autism diagnosis are still massively outnumbered by boys. So this, as I say, this is mirrored in other settings as well. In actual fact, most autism settings, like say, what do you call them? Bases, in schools where you sometimes have like learning support units, learning support bases, autism units. Girls are outnumbered by boys in most of those settings, and indeed in special schools you will also find, not just in autism special schools, but in all special schools, in all generic special schools, boys outnumber girls as well. So that's why she set up this group, so that girls could meet their peers and to help minimise feelings of isolation, to celebrate their successes, to help them manage anxiety. Yeah, something like this really would have benefited me at school. As I say, I just went to a bog standard mainstream, which prided itself on academic success, but didn't really have any real pastoral support for those with issues. Unless you were causing trouble, you were just ignored. I went to go to school's learning support unit once or twice a week up until about year 9 for sort of organisational support with maths, support with comprehension. Didn't look at my social skills at all, despite the fact they were flagged up by primary school, which I think was quite a big omission. It didn't help me. And then there was a lunchtime club, which I was encouraged to go to help with my social skills. Better than nothing, and I did meet 2 girls there who were a year below me. I got on friendly terms with for a short while, and we got, but the friendship didn't go anywhere really. Better than nothing, but I stopped going after a while because, I don't know, well, my OCD was getting worse as well at that point, which was going unsupported, and I just kind of shut myself away. But something where my anxieties would have been, where I would have got support more for my anxieties and mental health, that's what I really would have benefited from, far more than the academic support. So yeah, a group like that would have really benefited me. And also they would help with strategies to make, maintain and recognise friendships. Talked about, that's the most important thing when you're a teenager. Forget academics. I mean, yeah, academics are important, but if you don't know how to make friends, despite the fact you want a friend, but you don't know how to make friends, and then you're constantly rebuffed and you lose friendships because you don't know how to maintain them, that's really destroying to a teenager's self-esteem at that critical age when you're developing at a sort of transitional stage when friendships mean everything, and no teenager should go without a friend, Eventually I gave up trying and I kind of reconciled myself to a life without friends, and my mum would be like, oh, you're going to get really unhappy if you don't make friends. So at that age I just stopped caring because obviously I had my Kate Winslet obsession and I kind of retreated into that, and yeah, I wasn't unhappy or anything, but it did affect me, and feeling like invisible and like a non-entity, particularly when I started secondary school with high hopes to make friends, and I did try to make friends and it didn't work. Some kind of help from teachers or whatever, some kind of pastoral support to help me make friends and to understand friendship would have been really helpful, and they didn't provide that, which is really negligent if you ask me. So the next chapter, I don't know if I'm going to have time to finish it. I might come back to this next week. The camera might run out of me, I'm just saying that any time soon, but we'll see how we go on. The next chapter is Rona Tutt, who's the past president of the National Association of Head Teachers and an autism expert. And she talks about the special educational needs reforms that were brought in. And these special educational needs reforms that were brought in were supposed to put the child's needs, wishes at centre, but successive governments focus on standards and there's been a narrowing of a curriculum and a testing regime, and little regard for individual situations. So it's not personalised at all, she says. So, the theory of making it more personalised and individualised is not the reality, because actually it's just become more and more standards-based, more and more testing-based. Emphasis on a narrow range of academic achievements, very results-driven, and of course you've got austerity and cuts. Yeah, makes me so angry. So obviously, it just makes me really angry, because what happened when I was growing up is just being repeated. And despite all these kind of high aspirations, we're gonna sort it out, we're gonna give all child an individualised experience. No, that sounds all great, but it's not actually what's happening. And yeah, she says how, SEND people struggle to keep up with the pace of school because it's very one-sided, it's very homogenous, and everyone's different. So it's just not good at all. She says how working in partnership with parents is central to SEND reforms, but it is not possible to build up a holistic picture of the pupils unless it is known how they behave at home as well as at school. Yep. It's very important for schools to work with families, to find out what's going on at home. They did not do that when I was at school. They did not have that dialogue, and they should have done. Obviously, the educational psychologist spoke to my parents a little bit about what was going on at home and things, so they had an idea, but it didn't really get translated into the help I was given, which is really bad. She says how there should be a greater focus on mental health in schools. The government has been pushing for this focus, for this. And this focus may help to ensure that not only people who are disruptive come to staff's attention, but also the unusually quiet ones who suffer in silence. Again, there's often a gap between theory and practice. The government says they're going to do this, but then they don't put it into practice, because how can they when they're constantly cutting? It's disjointed, because if you're cutting with austerity and everything, how are you going to fund everything they say you're going to do? If you ask me, a lot of it is just lies and wins, because I don't really see any of this really happening, because I still hear, you hear about it all the time, forums and stuff, of children still being let down. So I don't really see how anything that's really happening here. There was, in December 2017, there was a green paper, Transforming Children and Young People's Mental Health, which said it said every pupil should feel valued. So again, it all sounds great in theory, but will this actually happen in practice? Autistics often see themselves as failures. As I said, I grew up feeling like a failure, because you're not really encouraged, you're not told what your strengths are, you're not made to feel good about yourself all the time. You're being told that you should be able to do these things, or told off for going at a slow pace or not working to the same standards as others. Your individuality is not encouraged, none of your strengths are celebrated, you're not made to feel good about yourself, you're not praised for anything, which isn't fair, because all the popular kids get praised just because they can fit into the system, but anyone who can't leaves school feeling like a failure. She talks about how girls with autism sometimes find it easier to make friends with younger children. I don't think that's just specific to girls with autism, I think it's possibly a case of boys as well. I can relate to that, because I certainly got on better with younger kids. She says how in one secondary school, an older autistic girl was given the role of being buddy to an autistic girl who had just joined in year 7, and how that boosts self-esteem and helps them both. That sounds like quite a good idea. She says how it's important to recognise strengths and interests, definitely. All rests with the school leader, she says. The ethos of the school comes from the attitude and behaviour of the person at top. Absolutely, I can completely second that. The head teacher at my primary school, who's left a long time ago now, all she seemed to care about was academics. She seemed to only care about the most popular, least disruptive students who were giving the school a good name on their league tables, who helped give the school a good Ofsted rating on academics. I think back in the 90s, Ofsted was mainly just focused on academics, but I think since then they have started to look more, at pastoral support. But back then I don't think they really cared about that at all. It really does rest with the school leader. No matter how good the teachers are, if you've got a crap head teacher who just cares about academics, then, she says how it's important. So I think I'm going to stop there. I'll stop there so the camera doesn't run out on me. And I'll carry on talking about this next week. So thank you for watching.